Hello, this is Ms. Yeomans doing a lecture for the urinary system for medical terminology. In this system, we're going to be looking at the main organs within the urinary system, which are the kidneys, the ureters, the bladder, the urethra, and the urinary meatus. Those are the main structures of the urinary system that we will be talking about. But let's back up just a moment and talk about what is the purpose of the urinary system. Urinary means pertaining to urine, so we have to talk about how the urinary system does an excretion of urine from the kidneys, which is one of the main functions. The kidneys actually filter out the blood and sends those waste products through the urine to be excreted. So as you look at the primary organs here within the urinary system here on the screen, you will see that number one is actually pointing to the left kidney. Remember, whenever you're looking at the patient, it's kind of a mirror image. What appears to be on the right for us is actually the patient's left. So number one is the left kidney. Then we talk about how the urine is produced in the kidney, then it goes through the ureter down to the urinary bladder. So it's formed here in the kidney. It goes down this little tube here called the urinary ureter, or what we typically say just ureter. So this would be the left ureter, and it travels down to this reservoir down here at the very bottom called the urinary bladder. So when the patient's bladder feels full or they feel some urge to go void, which is another word for peeing, then the urine leaves the bladder through the urethra and is carried outside of the body through the urinary meatus. So those are the main structures that you need to keep in mind of when we're talking about the urinary system. So let's talk about how long and how big these kidneys are. The average adult kidney is about 11 centimeters or centimeters long and 6 centimeters wide. And it weighs about 145 grams, which is less than half a pound, so it's not very big. Doesn't weigh very much. One of the big things that the kidneys do is they have a specific function of production of erythropoietin, which is, it causes the production of red blood cells, the renin, which helps to regulate blood pressure, and the prostaglandins, which act in several target organs with a variety of effects. So as you see, the kidneys are very important. They have very important jobs to do for us. So as we go through, you can see that there are a lot of different word parts for this particular chapter. These don't all say exactly what they're talking about, so you need to be very careful. Like cysto, we talked about in the digestive system, but it is meaning a bladder or a cyst, and it's one that is a fluid-filled sac. So cysto is talking about the bladder. Then nephro or reno talking about the kidney, and so on. Those are a little bit different than what you typically hear. You talk about that there's about 1 million nephrons that serve as the functional unit of the kidney. So we need to be very familiar that there are a lot of nephrons, but the nephron is the functional unit of the kidney. You'll actually use that information in not just this class, but also in your theory class, your clinical and lab classes, and then even so in transcription if you're in the medical assisting track. Alright, so here's a cross-section of the kidney, and it looks kind of cool because we've just kind of slit that kidney in half so we can see how it looks on the inside. You have these renal pyramids, which look like not real pointy pyramids, but they are pyramids. And these are very distinct when you look at the kidney. You've also got these veins and arteries that supply blood here within the kidney. So we're actually bringing the blood in with those red tubes, which are the arteries, and then what comes out is coming through the veins. And those have very, very important jobs. This is a cross-section of a real kidney, so it looks very similar to that cartoon picture, but they are very distinct, those little renal pyramids. This is what the nephron looks like, and remember that is the functional unit of the kidney. Very, very, very important that you remember that specific term, nephron being the functional unit of the kidney. Remember also, this is just a review, that distal means distant, it's far away, and proximo, which is proximal, is near. We talked about those in the earlier chapters in this particular class. So we talk about some of the things that are produced within the urinary system. One of those things is a chemical / hormone called antidiuretic hormone. We typically label that ADH, and you'll hear that in the lab class as well as theory. But this is increasing the reabsorption of water by those renal tubules within the inside of those kidneys. We also talk about the term micturition, and voiding. Those are other terms for urination or peeing. That's just very important that you remember those particular terms. We also have the picture that's on the screen now, which is the formation and the excretion of urine. This is not something that I'm going to ask that you label, but this is a very good quick example of what you will see the urinary system doing. So if you are one of those people that needs to see something, there you go. That's a definite, easy way to look at what the urinary system is doing. Then of course you have this great diagram of the filtration, reabsorption, and secretion through the urinary system. Okay? So we also look at some of the diagnostic tests and procedures that go along with the urinary system, and we very well know that keeping up with a patient's urinary input and outtake or output is very important. So we have a specific abbreviation called I&O, intake and output, which we gauge what the urine should look like and how much urine a patient should be producing. So I&O is often termed with your doctors, like, what's their I&O? What's their I&O? You might have even seen that on a dry erase board in the hospital when you visited a family member or a friend, and basically we're looking at what all the patient is taking in, such as drinks and foods, and we're also looking at IV fluids, so we can tell from the output what's going on inside of the body. We also know if we should be a little alarmed if there is not very much output, if we're putting in a lot of fluids. So that's something that we definitely keep in mind. We also look at a urinalysis. Now this is something that is very easily done. It's non-invasive. You have a patient give you a urine specimen in a cup. From the moment that that urine specimen is placed on the counter, you can go ahead and start making some observations to give the physician some information. You can give them an information about what the color of the urine is, the consistency. Does it look cloudy? Is it clear? Does it have things floating around in it? Does it have a different color? So does it look red, like it would be bloody? Sometimes patients bring us urine that looks orange, or sometimes it looks blue or green, and different medications can actually make the urine look that way. So all of that information that we do by just making an observation of what the urine looks like, very, very important. We also can do some little tests. One of those that's easily done in the office and even at home nowadays is a urine dipstick, where we dip the urine over this little stick, and we match it up with the little colors that are on the side of the bottle. Now all of these little things tell us different things that are showing up in the urine, such as sugar, white blood cells, red blood cells, protein, and that is very important when we're trying to figure out what's going on with our patient. We also can look at the specific gravity, and this is like the density of the urine, so how dense is it? We definitely know that the clearer the urine, the less dense it is. So sometimes when you see a dark colored urine, it's very, very dense because it's very, very concentrated. We also can use different instruments like a urometer. That way we can look at different cells that are showing up in the urine. Definitely when we see things like blood sugar, that kind of makes us think, is this patient a diabetic? If it's a pregnant patient, if they're spilling over sugar in their urine, then that's something we got to be concerned about. Same thing with protein and ketones. So those are very important. We even can see pus in the urine. That's pretty indicative of urinary infection. So all of these things are extremely important when we're looking at urine, and those are easy, non-invasive tests that we can do. Different types of urine specimens we can get. We can get just a random voided test, a clean catch, and then we also can catheterize the patient, whether it be an indwelling catheter or an in and out catheter, meaning we just go in, we get our urine specimen, and then we remove the catheter from the bladder so it doesn't stay in there for a long period of time. Different blood tests that we can do. We can do a serum creatinine, a BUN, which is the blood urea nitrogen. We can also see some very important things from those blood tests as to what's going on in the kidneys. Some of the really cool stuff that everybody likes to see is what's in the urine underneath that microscope. Here are some pictures that are also in your textbook of some of the things that we will see in the urine under the microscope. Picture A is just some epithelial cells that we see, which comes from the skin, so it's basically like a contaminant. In picture D, what we see are white blood cells, and these are all the pictures here on the screen. In picture B as in boy, what we see here is a waxy cast. In picture C, we see red blood cells. Now, we can see red blood cells because maybe a patient is on their menses, or maybe that they are passing blood in their urine. So those are very important things that we would need to indicate to our physicians if they show up in that urine specimen. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about catheters, and I'm going to stop right here and flip over to a new lecture.